Well, it's that time of every 5 years in South Africa when political rallies are inevitable and the vote for me, I will make life better speech is not uncommon. And barely 48 hours from now, South Africans will head to the polls for the fifth time since the end of apartheid to elect a new president. Hello and welcome to the opening edition of South Africa Decides. I am Olukayode, Alayande. We'll be right back after this overview of the geography, landmarks and culture of the South African people. Don't go away. If you're just joining us, this is South Africa Decides, and today we will be looking at the past 20 years of democracy and what the future holds for the country located at the southern tip of Africa. I'm not alone in the studio right now, as I have Moketi Sam Monesa. He's the South African Consul General in Nigeria. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, it's been 20 years on. When you look back, look down memory lane, what pictures readily come to mind?
Well, the development that took place in the last 20 years. When you look back and you see 20 years ago, South Africa has changed a lot. Obviously, South Africa was always developed, but with the democracy that came in, then more development, because now it was the black people who were now determining their future in South Africa. But a lot has happened economically and otherwise. A lot of industries have also come up, and although we are still talking about unemployment, because it's going to be a lot of work, really, to get everybody employed, to address the inequalities that have been there for centuries. In 20 years, it's quite a challenge, but a lot really has happened.
Now, would you say that South Africans are necessarily happier people 20 years on?
South Africans are happier people. It's always good to know that the constitution of the country where you are allows you to elect the party that would rule you. And whenever it comes to elections, you will see the excitement in the country because everybody is just excited that he's going to participate in the future, in the decision or deciding the future of the country.
All right. What would you say has made South Africa unique as an African country 20 years now?
What makes it unique is the way we got our freedom. After decades of fighting the system, and then comes the day when all South Africans, black, white, and coloreds, decide that we have to sit around the table and decide our future. And that indeed happened. And the only song that was sung by South Africans was that of reconciliation. So that makes us unique in a sense that we realized at one stage in our lives that we are all South Africans and we need to sit around the table and talk.
All right, what would you say has been or have been the stiffest challenges that the South African people are now facing right now? What is topmost on the government's mind that it needs to do for its people, and what's been the biggest challenge for South Africa right now?
As I mentioned before, unemployment is one of the biggest challenges, and this can only be reached if there's more and more investment in the country. Jobs should be created. That is, and then without a lot of investment in the country by investors from abroad, especially in industrial area, it is very difficult to create many jobs. So the jobs, that is one big challenge that we have.
All right. Just like you mentioned, there is a growing sense of inequality in the country. Going forward, what impact do you think that's going to have on the coming elections?
No, there's no growing sense of inequality in the country. Since for the past 20 years, equality has come in, and people are all equal. Everybody can go to the polls and elect the government. But
all right, allow me to cut you short there. When I say sense of inequality, I'm not talking about apartheid, color bar, or any of such thing. When you watch South Africans respond to interviews on television, you hear them say things like, some people are having jobs we're not having with neglect. That's what I mean by a sense of we're not having and some people are having. How do you think that that's going to impact on the election that's coming up?
In fact, that matter is what makes people go to the polls, because there are those that are disgruntled and say, we can offer jobs, so we have a new party. So, normally with campaigns, many parties, new parties come on board and they all promise that. But in any way, it promotes that electric feeling that we are going to elect the people that we think are going to bring change. And those that are saying that we have for the past 20 years achieved this and that and that, and we can still, this party that is still in government can still take us far. Those also will go into the polls and say, we vote for this party. Then the strong opposition in South Africa, and this is what makes democracy more vibrant.
Now, you mentioned strong opposition. Do you think that the opposition is strong enough to unseat the ANC?
No, I don't think I must go there. Let me not preempt that let us leave the South Africans to go to the polls and decide which one.
All right,
Yes.
your country hosted the last edition of the World Economic Forum on Africa. 4 years on, what gains did your country take away from that experience?
More investors came in. And it's not only that, we managed to also be in some of the big bodies in the world. South Africa became a member of the BRICS, and then we, apart from being member of BRICS, there are other organizations where South Africa was elected into. And then South Africans have been appointed in international bodies. And it's quite, what is most important is what is happened in the country itself. To build an economy, especially in a country that has a lot, that has minerals, and a GDP which is high and which has been high for a very long time, to go beyond that which we have, it needs hard work, and therefore the percentage growth of the country has been 1 point something, 2 point something percent, and we have maintained that. We haven't really gone down. We have maintained the around 2% increase on the GDP. And I think that World Economic Forum and other bodies that have been coming to South Africa, convening there, they have really taken us a step further.
All right, South Africa's Consul General, Mr. Mokate, will take a short break now. I'll come back to you. But as the race to power heats up in South Africa, political parties and their candidates have been working relentlessly to convince citizens that they are the change the country needs. Take a listen to this.
I think it's a great privilege that we arrive in elections in 2014, 20 years into democracy, really where we say, let's talk about South Africa's future, let's talk about South Africa's tomorrow, which in the main speaks to every single young South African who sits in this room. I think what we signed into in 1994 was the right for South Africans to vote. Can there be a political party that represents all sorts of races, that represents all of us as South Africans? That when we arrive here, we build a country that belongs to all of us as South Africans. And that's about making sure that what is left over from not having been done in 1994 about land reform, about making sure that South Africans don't ever talk about an economy of two slides where some are included and others are excluded, that we must talk about an inclusive economy. We must vote for a party that has proven that we're able to create jobs. And as the DA, 70% of the jobs that were created in the quarter here in South Africa were created by the DA.
As the EFF were asking questions around economic freedom, we appreciate that there was political freedom in 1994, which we acknowledge, but the political freedom was never an end in itself. It was a means to an end. The real end was the economic emancipation of our people. Our party is probably the most youthful party. It's a youth-led party. In every policy that you will see in our manifesto, the issue of youth is ingrained. We don't have a special youth section. Right through the manifesto, you'll find that youth issues are covered because we are a party of the youth and we are a party of the future.
Welcome back. South Africans will go to the polls on May the 7th, but this will be the first election without the father of South African democracy, Nelson Mandela, who passed away last December at the ripe age of 95. Now, I still have with me in the studio the Consul General of South Africa in Nigeria, Mukete Isam Munesa. This is the first election without Nelson Mandela. How much does your country miss Nelson Mandela?
We miss him a lot. You know, for a person who had stayed 27 years in prison and coming out of prison, managing to bring all people together and preaching reconciliation, we really miss him. He is the real father of democracy in South Africa. And yes, indeed, no party, be it in opposition or what, doesn't forget him. All parties remember him very well.
All right, talking about Nelson Mandela, we all know his ideals, we know what he stands for, but many South Africans seem to express some kind of disappointment in President Jacob Zuma in that they don't think that he's been able to exhibit some of those qualities that's, according to South Africans now, that there is a huge sense of he's not so much like Nelson Mandela. How justified or valid is this kind of sentiment?
You know, Nelson Mandela always said, I am not alone. This government is not Nelson Mandela. This government, we are all a team. And with the democratic changes in South Africa, the leader of government, the leader of the country, doesn't work alone. So it is the party. He works within the manifesto of the party, within the constitution of the party. So we cannot say Nelson Mandela was successful, but Zuma is not successful. This is teamwork. The South Africans are a democratic nation, and if one fails, we fail all. So the responsibility is with every South African. Yeah.
All right, Nelson Mandela, no doubt, was a great man. Is there something the government or the people of South Africa are doing in terms of being able to scientifically and structurally pass on the ideals of Nelson Mandela? For instance, put some of those things in civic studies in schools such that the people we call the freeborns, you know, that portion of South African population who were born after the apartheid and all of that, can be able to structurally learn those ideals. Is there anything like that going on in South Africa?
Definitely. At schools, people are taught history, and they are taught where we come from. You know, history used to be written by non-South Africans, but now it is South Africans that write their own history. And not only at schools, you also find that there are many NGOs in South Africa, and these NGOs are doing a lot among the grassroots to teach the people where we came from and where we want to be. Yes, indeed, there are. And there are, the government itself has put up all the things, institutions that has to do with the youth development. And it is those institutions that are helping educate the bond freeze, that this is where we come from and this is where we want to go to.
All right. Nigeria took over from South Africa in terms of the largest economy. I mean, the first time in close to 10 years. And a lot of South Africans weren't happy about that. We thought we were brothers.
No, South Africans congratulated Nigeria for that. Because for us, if Nigeria reaches that point, it is beneficial to South Africa. In a sense that we've got a lot of investors in South Africa who would like to go out of South Africa to invest outside. And you have seen in Nigeria, there are so many South African companies that are coming here because Nigeria is it's a huge market, and therefore, having crossed that threshold, for us, it is indeed an achievement for Africa, not only for Nigeria, but for Africa to have two powers on the continent growing at that rate.
All right. Every election is an opportunity for every country to either position for making or marrying. Now, what kind of South Africa do you want to see after the 2014 elections?
After the 2014 elections, we want to see South Africa that is more prosperous, South Africa that is going to create jobs for the youth, South Africa that is even going to attract more investment, and South Africa that is even going to be able to invest outside, South Africa that is going to play a major role on the continent with sister countries like Nigeria to build up the continent and to liberate it even further from the vestiges of colonialism.
All right. Let's go back to the World Economic Forum that's going on in Nigeria now. You've had some advantage from hosting it last year. Now that it's in Nigeria, this year is holding. What ways do you also hope to take advantage of the World Economic Forum on Africa?
You have just mentioned that Nigeria has just become the largest economy on the continent. And it is very good that the World Economic Forum is hosted here. And South Africa, together with Nigeria, will be able to club together to push the continent forward. Because it is good that we had the World Economic Forum now on this continent, and this is the second time that it is coming to Nigeria. That is quite an achievement for us, and we are going to use it to get mileage out of it, to push the development of the continent.
All right, thank you very much for coming on South Africa Decides today. I have been talking to the Consul General of South Africa in Nigeria, Mr. Moketi Sam Monesa. Now, the road to democracy in South Africa was marked by centuries of racial discrimination and economic oppression, but an unyielding sacrifice and resistance ended white minority rule and the era of apartheid. Now South Africans are trying to build on this foundation of freedom and democracy. In less than 48 hours, citizens will take the future of the nation in their own hands. They will decide who rules them for the next 5 years. You can send us your thoughts on the South African election either on Twitter at TVC News_Africa. That's our package for today. You can join us again tomorrow, 11:30 Central African Time, for another episode of our special program, South Africa Decide. I am Olukayode Alayande. Bye for now.